Have you ever wondered how detailed a tiny little N-scale vehicle can be? Then today I'm going to show you how I've built this little red truck with tons of details. Operating headlights, number plates and logo, chrome detailing, proper windshield and glazing, and much more. This third and final part of GHQ's white metal kit build is going to be epic. So without further ado, let's get started. This kit is the most complex out of the three, so much so that it comes with a detailed literature and guide that the others didn't have, as if I need it. You get the chassis, the flatbed, the cab, and a separate cab interior complete with a driver figure, a bunch of wheels, the mud flaps, even 3 very tiny and delicate rear view mirrors. The basic remains the same as before, so I'll go over them quickly. Clean the seam lines and extra material wherever required. File off irregularities. I explained the background of these microfiles in the last episode, so please go and check that out if you haven't already. Glue the components using 5-minute epoxy. The cab needed some special attention since I wanted an operating headlight for the model. The headlights were already marked on the casting, so I drilled 1.2mm hole so that I can put 0402 surface mount LEDs. I bought these pre-wired LEDs from eBay a couple of years ago, and they were great to achieve scale lighting in N and HO scale. As you've seen in the last couple of episodes, I used Rust-Oleum flat black primer to prime the components. The cab forward truck from White Motor Company is a true classic, and most surviving members or photographs are fantastic subject for weathering or abandoned vehicle dioramas. However, I wanted a proper, well-maintained working version to bring some contrast in the otherwise shabby port environment, and this is what drew my attention. Bright red and black, lively chrome colors, attractive details. That's what I'll try to achieve in this build, except perhaps the right out of wash look. So I used spray paint for the Chevy van, paintbrush for the forklift, and it's time to move on to airbrush for this truck. I decided to use enamel paint for this model. I took some flat red enamel paint in a small container and thinned it with Tester's enamel thinner to about 40%. I masked the wheels and the chassis and started painting the side of the flatbed. I reversed the handle for the second coat and sprayed from the top so the spray covers all the areas. As the paint dries on the flatbed, I moved on to the cab interior and the driver. I chose light gray and light blue so that the details are visible clearly when looked at from the outside of the cab. You remember Steve from the last episode, right? So I made Steve a white person, and I decided to use a darker skin for this guy. We should give him a name as well, no? Let's call him Alan.
Alan! 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 Al! Alan!
It is evident that my masking was not complete around the wheels, but that is easily rectified. I took some enamel thinner and removed as much stray paint as possible using a brush. The primer is tough acrylic, so enamel thinner doesn't put much dent on that layer, a very good reason why you should alter the type of paints for each layer. Once most of the paint was removed, I painted the chassis and the wheels black using flat black paint. Here's a neat trick if your paint starts separating from your thinner during the painting process while you work on masking or other details perhaps. Block the nozzle using a tissue and release air. This will revert the air back to the paint chamber and mix the paint thoroughly to a very even consistency. Now, I had a bit of a story with the cab. I painted it, done detailing, put the clear coat, and then in the rush of reaching the finish line, I used the wash before the clear coat totally cured. The wash started reacting to the uncured clear coat, and instead of flowing through the cracks, it just started clogging on the surface. Things started looking very messy, of course. Now, I took some strong mineral oil and washed everything off using a hard bristle paintbrush and a toothbrush. Restarting with the cab, I masked all the open edges of the cab for all the windows, including the little vent windows, the back view window, and of course the windshield. This will ensure that the edges are more defined and looks finer and to the scale. It took some effort, but as you'll see, it is worth it. Rest is again the same really. Apply 3 coats of uniform layer of red paint on the cab and then seal it off with a clear coat and let it dry for a full 24 hours this time before moving on to detailing. Since I was a little overcautious by then, I moved from enamel-based Humbrol wash to India ink. I diluted the ink with some distilled water, added a bit of isopropyl alcohol to make it flow better, and started using it. I applied it on the grooves and then removed any excess with a wet tissue wrapped around a toothpick. It's time to add some chrome. I sprayed the chrome spray paint into a deep food container. The liquid paint gets accumulated in the corner and I used my ultra detailed brush to apply it on the detailed parts. The reference pictures of the real thing were really helpful at this stage. Next I moved on to black to accentuate the wiper arm, the center of the horns, and the underside of the fender. The cab now looks the part, so I sealed everything down with the 2 layers of gloss clear coat. It's time to remove the remaining masking tapes and then clear the edges of any glue or paint irregularities using a sharp hobby knife. I used clear acetate, otherwise known as the overhead projector or OHP sheet, to cut out the glass sections. Attaching them was a little tricky because the frames are sealed from all sides in this model and there is no sideways access to hold the little clear pieces. So I added a bit of masking tape on them and used tiny amount of blue tack to attach a piece of toothpick on the masking tape to make a temporary handle. I used Tester's Model Master Clear Part cement on the inside edges of the window and placed the windows gently. Once the glue cured, the handle was gently removed. For the windshield, I bent the acetate sheet to match the form of the curved windshield and then attached it using superglue. Once everything dried, glass portions cleaned using isopropyl alcohol. It is time that Alan gets placed where he belongs so that he can do his job. It was a tight fit due to the extra layers of paint, but that means no glue was necessary. Following the prototype, I painted the wheel caps red and used aluminium colored paint to accentuate the rim and the fixtures. The reason for not using chrome here is because on the prototype, these parts were muted. I also painted the tail light and the turning lights with glossy red and orange paints respectively and put some shine on the mud flap fixtures. Next I masked up the wheels and put a thorough coat of Tester's gloss clear coat. Coming to the most interesting features of the model, I wanted to keep the model portable, so the headlight power unit had to be incorporated inside the model. I made a button battery holder using scrap MDF and pieces of copper plates that fits well inside the flatbed. Then I built a large N-scale wooden box using pieces of coffee stirrer and stock scale lumber. To wire the LEDs to the power supply, first I removed the enamel coating from the thin winding wires and tinned the bare tips and the copper contacts. Then it was a simple task of soldering the wires in place. There was no place to put a switch in this model, so I decided to go for a slide switch. Basically, a thin bit of strong plastic that is wedged between the 2 cells to break the circuit. I glued the first 2 planks of the roof on the 2 sides of the plastic wedge when it is in place. The idea here is that the wedge is hidden by the thin slot between the 2 planks, but it can be taken on and off easily as needed. Rest was really easy. Simply glue the other planks, let everything cure, and sand it on a 400 grit sandpaper to get square corners on the edges. It still needed a base, and I used more scale lumber to build a hollow base around the edges so that it doesn't interfere with the battery pack when I must remove the box to replace the batteries. The box needs its support structure, so more wooden beams were glued around the edges to give it a shipping crate look. I used 5-minute epoxy to glue the battery pack. It needed a stronger glue so that the block stays in place when the box or the sails are removed. The sail block was centered carefully to ensure that it can be capped with the box easily. I used walnut stain on the beams and left the rest in natural wood color. The box desperately needed some labels. I did not have clear decal papers and was too impatient to order new ones. I resized some shipping labels to fit the box and then printed them on semi-transparent tracing paper. Solid red and wooden background of the logos ensure that they blend well with the wooden model. The labels were fixed in place with Testors Dullcoat lacquer. The lacquer not only fixes them in place but also protects the printed surface. The cab interior piece blocks the holes I drilled for the headlight, so I drilled another set of tiny little holes for the wires to go through. Another hole was drilled on the flatbed so that the wires can be pulled to the power pack. Then I carefully placed the cab in its place while ensuring that the LEDs are in their housing. The wires were then pulled through the hole under the flatbed, enamel coatings removed, and joined with the leads on the battery pack. At last! You put the tiny cells in the chamber and the headlights light up beautifully. As you put the plastic wedge, it switches off. Now that everything is in order, I used super glue to attach the cab in place. I used red and black enamel paint to mark the positive and negative poles of the battery pack and insulated the joint. Notice no soldering was done here. Now, to secure the LEDs and to give the headlight some lens shape, I used Model Master Clear Part Cement to cover the LEDs. The wires were then fixed in the hole using tiny piece of blue tack and painted black to hide them underneath the chassis. It's time to put everything together. The cells in the tiny battery pack, then the wooden cover, and then the wedge switch. The plastic strip was also cut to shape and bent to hide behind the wooden central beam. Weathering started with some black wash to accentuate the ribs and crevices of the sides of the bed. Then I created a dust tone by mixing raw sienna, yellow ochre, and grey dry pastel powder. I applied it to the wheels and underneath the chassis to simulate dust. You don't see dust on the tread area of the wheels of a working vehicle, so to remove any stray pastel on the tread surface, I took some water on a paintbrush and washed the threads. I printed the White Motor Company logo and some number plates on a standard printer paper, painted the edges black, and glued them in place. The only item left were the rearview mirrors. As the little truck was anxiously waiting for his last piece of jewelry, his big cousin sneaked up from behind to see what's going on. Of course, without the mirrors, Alan had no clue that he was so close. The jealous fella just wanted to grab the mirrors for himself. I painted the back of the mirrors and the attachment fixtures black and glued them in place. Whew, quite a build, huh? But satisfying all the way through if detail and accuracy is your game. The truck looks fabulous, but now the other vehicles on the layout look like they need some attention. Detailing is a rabbit hole for sure, I tell ya. So out of the 3 models in the series, which one is your favorite? Which technique would you use for your own models? Let me know in the comments below. I hope that you enjoyed this series and these demonstrations were helpful to make your own models with high degree of details. Thank you for watching, and until next time, have fun making miniatures.